Okay, so that's our drums sorted. We might come back, we might tweak them a little bit later, but for now, let's move on to some melodic content and get some piano in there. Now, we try and keep to the Ableton presets and the effects and the instruments that come with Ableton, just so that you've got something you can start with and you don't have to purchase anything else. But if you're really trying to create this kind of classic house sound, then you really have to look into the plugins of the time. Now, we've used the Roland samples to create our drum beat, but if we're looking for a kind of piano from the 90s, we need to look no further than the Korg M1. And the Korg M1 is a synth that came out in 1988, and it kind of revolutionized dance music. Just about every single track from the 90s had a preset from the Korg M1. It's famous for its piano, organ, and pads, and just about every single preset has been used in dance music, and you'll hear it straight off as soon as you start using it. I mean, just jumping straight into the organ presets, for example, you can hear it straight away, the sounds of the 90s. It's that lovely warm organ sound, very common in a lot of dance tracks from the 90s. And the same goes for the pianos and the brass and just about everything else within the synth. It's a really great synth. It's not too expensive. If you're looking for a hardware Korg M1, it's vintage and you will probably pay quite a bit of money for it. But the synth is actually very good value for money. And if you're serious about making classic house, I definitely recommend getting this plugin. So we're going to get into this plugin, and I'm not going to really go into all the settings. I'm not going to go really hardcore into it, because you can see there are a lot of settings within here, and we could probably do a whole course on how to edit this and how to use it all. But as with the 90s, when this first came out, all they did was use presets in tracks. So that's why any preset you load from here will instantly sound like that track or like that track. That's what we're going to do today. We're going to just jump in and just use a preset, and we'll tweak it, of course, with EQ and maybe a bit of reverb or delay or whatever. But for the most part, we're not going to be touching too much within the Korg M1. So the first thing we look at is the browser. So I'm going to click the browser button in here, and it will load up all the presets that come with this soft synth. Now we have a way of narrowing down these between the different instruments. So we can click on organ and we can see organ presets, keyboard presets, strings. There's just so much within here, and I'm finding new ones all the time that I love using. But we're going to look at the pianos. Obviously, this is what we want to put a piano line in there. So we're going to look at some of these. Now, there are some fantastic presets in here, and I've used quite a few of these in my tracks. The M1 house split is fantastic. We heard it earlier. I used it for a bit of organ, but that also has a lovely piano in it as well. It's split across the keyboard. The piano left and right is a really nice sounding piano as well. But the one we're going to use today is the Velo piano, and the reason I like this one, and I go to it a lot, is that it's a high velocity piano, so every single hit is really crisp and really strong. It really kind of kicks through the mix. It's a really nice sounding piano. And I'm not going to do much to it within here, actually. What I'm going to do is I'm going to double click to load that preset, and it's now loaded into the M1. And as I say, I'm not going to get into any of these settings within here, but what I will show you is the Master Effects tab within here. Now this shows the effects that are loaded onto that preset, and we've got two effects on here. We have a hall reverb and an exciter, and I can switch between these effects and have a look at the controls on them just by flicking these two buttons here. But what I want to look at is the hall reverb, and I don't want that much reverb on it. All the drum hits that we've got so far are really kind of piercing in the mix. They're really strong, and we want to have the same effect with the piano, so we don't want so much reverb on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to play the piano back, just hitting a few keys on the keyboard. And then I'm going to reduce the amount of reverb in the mix. So as you can hear, I'm just reducing the amount of reverb there. It's now at about 4%. It was about 30% to start with, and I've just reduced the amount of reverb. We can always add our own reverb later if we wanted to. If we wanted to put our own reverb on there, or we could go back and tweak this. We might need to, we might not. But for now, that'll do. That's all I'm going to change within this Korg M1. The sound is already brilliant, and let's move on from there. So now we've got to come up with our piano line. And if you're anything like me, I've had no lessons in playing the piano. I don't know too much about chord theory either. I've just kind of picked things up as I've gone along. And luckily, there is a fantastic plugin part of Ableton that I use all the time, and under MIDI effects you'll see the chord plugin, and this you kind of drop in before your soft synth, and it allows you to play chords just by hitting one key on the keyboard. So as you can see on here, this is a representation of the keyboard at the moment. If I hold the A key down, you'll see I'm playing the A key. So it's just playing one key at a time. And what I can do is with this chord plugin, I can build up chords. So each one of these little dials here represents another note on the keyboard. So when I hold down the A key and then I adjust one of these little rotary dials here, I can add another note in. So I can start building a chord up. For example, if I wanted to do a minor chord, I'd do the second note 3 semitones up and the third note 7 semitones notes up. And then if we look at the keyboard here, I'm just going to hold down the A key and you can see I'm playing a chord. So that's a minor chord now, and I can move around all over the keyboard and start playing other chords from around the different keys, all with just pressing one button. So it becomes really easy to kind of create these different chords, and what I can do is I can start building these chords up further and creating more interesting combinations. So at the moment it's just a minor chord. Let's add an extra note within there. So let's create a minor 7th. So I've added another note within there, up another 3 semitones. As you can hear, we're already kind of creating that kind of classic house sound just by adding that extra note in there. So here's the minor chord without it. So it sounds good, but let's just add that note back in there again. So that's a minor 7th. Let's add another note at the top and make it a minor 9th. So we're going to take that 10 semitones and add 4 to it. And then we have got our A minor 9th. It's got a real kind of luscious sound now that we're building on it, and I think that's enough to kind of go forward with it. I say it makes playing chords so much easier, and you can just concentrate on the actual notes and building the rhythm within your track, especially if you're not great at playing the keyboard. So we have our preset loaded there, we have our chord in there. Let's just put a little bit of EQ on that. I just want to get rid of the bottom end again just to make sure it's not too muddy. So I'm just going to put a low cut in there. There we go. There's a little bit of bottom end in there. I might need to adjust it a bit later, but it's just enough there to kind of cut through the mix. So we can start playing around we can just play back our track and just see about hitting some notes and seeing how they sound. Okay, that's quite high in our mix. Let's turn that down a bit. So we can just start playing around with this here. I can hit stuff on the keyboard, but what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start creating a MIDI clip, and we'll just start playing some notes around. So I'm going to hit the B key, just create a note, and we'll start putting some notes in and seeing how it sounds. Let's just loop that up. There's no real rules for this, just playing around with notes. Because you have that chord plugin that's already handling all the chords, you just got to start playing around with the notes and seeing what sounds good, and just come up with some rhythms. If it works for you, you can just key in these notes in and do it that way. I like just drawing them on like this. Really doesn't matter. You can jam out or you can start programming. So I've got some notes there. They're just, some of them are on the beat, some of them are off the beat. Just play around with your kind of structures and how you want it to do. I'd say it's just a case of experimenting, placing notes in different places and just starting shifting them around, seeing what sounds good. And now, just to make it a bit more unique, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start moving some of these notes around just so they're slightly off the beat. So it's almost like I'm playing them in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the note and I'm going to hold down the command key, which allows me to turn the grid off temporarily. So I can just drag it without it snapping anywhere. So that's the Apple key on a Mac. I'm assuming probably the control key on a PC. But it should allow you to just be able to just move it slightly without it snapping to anything. There you go, just moving the notes slightly off the grid just creates that more of a swing to it. And as I say, it's more of a feeling this, you kind of just, you can use the grooves in there and do all this kind of, you can use the grooves with an Ableton and really kind of do it strictly. So you've got the same groove on each different MIDI clip you've got. But I tend to like just doing it all manually, and then you get a feel. It's more human if you just kind of nudge notes yourself and just play around. And also you learn more about kind of shuffling and more about quantization when you start making these little adjustments yourself, and you start noticing these little tricks that you can then put into your tracks. So we got some notes in there now. Now we need to kind of work on getting it in the mix a bit more. It's already kind of sitting nicely because of the sound of the piano is very upright and it's really in your face. But what we want it to do is we want the kick to kind of come through that, and to be able to kind of really merge it with the rest of the track. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the sidechain on the Ableton compressor. So I'm going to get a compressor from the Ableton effects. I'm going to put that on the channel, and I'm going to open up the options channel so I can choose the sidechain option. So with this compressor, what I'm aiming to do is merge it in more with the mix. So we're using the compressor to kind of change, kind of more equal the levels of the keys of the piano. But we also want it to kind of sidechain the kick, so it's ducking the kick, so it kind of feels like it's part of the mix. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first enable sidechain. And then from the audio from, I'm going to choose my kick because that's what I want to sidechain. So whenever the kick happens, I want this to lower in volume so that the kick is above the piano, or at least the piano ducks a little bit so that it allows the kick to come through a bit further. And it all makes it feel part of the mix. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to leave all the settings as standard, and I'm just going to lower the threshold until I can start hearing that kind of that pumping happening from the piano where it's ducking the kick. You can see just here where the compressor is kind of kicking in. As soon as I started dropping the threshold, you saw that it was kind of really kicking into action, and it was lowering the volume of the keys as they were pressed when the kick was on. So it kind of merges it all in a bit more, and just makes the whole mix sound tighter.